Hello and welcome to my presentation called An Application of the Team Process Capability Model to Team Resilience Factors. In this presentation, I'm going to be talking about team resilience. I will provide a definition while discussing two elements of team resilience: process compliance, which generally is how well teams follow existing processes and procedures, and process resilience, which represents a team's ability to adapt existing processes and procedures to changing environmental conditions. I will then briefly provide a discussion on the team process capability model, and then I will apply the resilience factors to this model to provide a better understanding of how team resilience affects team performance. And at the end, I'm going to provide recommendations on how a team can be managed to be more resilient based upon the type of environmental conditions that they face. So, what is team resilience? Team resilience is defined simply as the ability of teams to react and adapt to complex and changing environmental factors. Within this definition, there are two key elements: reaction and adaptation. When we talk about reaction, we talk about a team's ability to take direct action against environmental disruptions. This normally is based upon increases or decreases in the demands provided, on the demands placed upon the team by the environment. And adaptation refers to action taken against increasing environmental complexity. This is a team's ability to change how it functions, and the social technical configuration is aligned to exploit environmental demands when they change. So, an organizational team resilience, which is a broader term, involves the ability of a team to return to normal operations during turbulent times. And turbulent times during this definition involves basically complexity and variability. If we talk about increasing environmental complexity, the number of different threats or the number of different demands that the environment places on a team has changed. When we talk about variability, we may talk about like increases and decreases in a property of the demand that is being provided by the team to the environment, such as an increase in the number of patients, or the increase in the number of products, or even simply an increase in the failure rate of a product, or a change in the number of any variability within that product. So once again, we have reaction and adaptation. Reaction within an organizational team resilience model involves the ability to return to normal operations when there is low environmental complexity. Actually, in most cases, the reaction requires low environmental complexity, but it's usually, for reaction, we deal with an increase in the variability within the system. And adaptation is more involved with addressing increased complexity. And this is a four-step model that actually the author of one of the references that I use provides in his team resilience model, which is very similar to a continual improvement model, in which you detect the type of complexity in the environment. The team then identifies a means to address that complexity. They apply it, and then they sense how that application met that demand, and then they recalibrate in order to understand how the changes that they applied to the social technical model that they operate within applied to the complexity that the environment posed upon them. Then we have team resilience behaviors. So these team resilience behaviors, they range between stress and complete breakdown. When a team is under a low level of complexity or low level of demand, there may be some stress. The stress is when the team is required to increase short-term ability to absorb systematic variation or capacity. So this is like, for instance, if a system suddenly has to work, let's say if the normal processing rate is like 10 units per hour, and they suddenly have to increase to 10 to 12 units per hour. This puts a stress upon the social technical system, in which the system is required to perform at a higher level. I will discuss this briefly with the process capability model. Now, at the other end of the continuum, we have team breakdown. This occurs when the team can no longer keep up with the change that the environment has applied to the team, and all of a sudden the team begins to turn to survival behaviors such as coping strategies. And some coping strategies can range from leaving the team because people can no longer handle it, handle the stress, to conflict within the team to try to change the team's behavior in certain ways. A very recent example we have is with COVID, where we have healthcare systems that are so overwhelmed they're having breakdowns in certain areas where suddenly nurses and doctors are just not showing up to work and stuff because they have exceeded their capability to absorb the demand, and they have a complete team breakdown. When this occurs, there has to be very drastic measures to restore the social technical system to a level to at least provide a minimum level of performance. The team process resilience has two components. You have process compliance and process resilience. Process compliance within this model refers to the ability to strictly adhere to organizational or team best practices or procedures. What process compliance says is when the level of demand that the environment places on the social technical system increases, the team is best able to follow the processes and procedures in order to be disciplined enough to go through to the other side and handle this short-term disruption. So when we deal with process compliance, this is best used when you have either short-term disruption, or if you have a sudden increase in the variability or the demand that the environment places upon the team. But this ensures that the team has the discipline to basically do what they're best at. Since the requirements of the system has not changed, the processes that are in place and the team social technical design is best capable of handling this change. So process resilient is similar, but it's much different in a way. It refers to the team's ability to adapt existing processes and procedures to evolving environmental demands. So what this means is when we have increased complexity, maybe the type of demand is changed, or maybe we have a change in the complexity, which is basically the complexity is the changes in the interactions within the environment that the team is required to address. Maybe they provide the same product, but the demands that the product fulfills has changed. So the product that they provide no longer is useful within the role that it used to be. Within the context of COVID, you have healthcare systems that were not designed to handle pandemics. So all of a sudden, there's a new complexity involved that they were not designed to handle. Teams that are highly process resilient would be able to identify this new pandemic situation and then either import new processes or adapt existing ones to address this new environmental demand. So the main focus in process resilience is returning the social technical system to a normal or improved operating state. Either we changed how the social technical system is designed, which includes processes, to address this new operating state, or we completely change how the social technical system operates. And this is part of the process resilience model. There's a 4-step continual improvement model that is used to evolve processes to a new complex state. And the main goal of this is to take feedback mechanisms from the environment to identify what needs to be changed, then pull in the resources to change the social technical system so that it can address the environmental demands. But suffice to say that process resilience focuses on changing how the social technical system is configured to address changes in the complexity of an environment. This is the team process capability model. And as you can see here, you've got a line that goes from the bottom left to the top right. And basically you have demand on the x-axis and the output of the process on the y-axis. And as long as the demand and the output are both the same, we say that the social technical system is able to provide what is required of the environment. The requisite process capability, in short, is the ability to operate at a requisite level. Basically, it could operate at this point for a very long time. Now, once you get beyond that, we begin to have to stretch the team. They begin to work outside of their comfort zone to a marginal process capability area. This marginal process capability area is the area where they could perform at a short-term level before the team begins to start to wear down or break down. Past the marginal process capability area, we start entering this entropy area where we start to get diminishing returns on the process outputs. And then once we get to the peak, we have this breakdown area where suddenly the team begins to break down. If we were to use this within resilience terms, the point where we start to see stress is at the requisite process capability area. But once we get past the marginal process capability area, the stress becomes such that the team can no longer cope anymore. So now they begin to do survival strategies by using instinctive behaviors that may be different than their processes tell them to. This is where process compliance begin to break down. Then once you get to the entropy area, they begin to use these processes less and less and start to resort to more survival-based instincts up to a point when the whole system, the whole social technical system begins to break down. Now, when we apply the team resilience model to this, we notice that it changes in environmental complexity, reduces the process capability because the way that the social technical system is designed can no longer address the demands of the environment. So as a result, the overall process output in relation to the demand of the environment will decrease. And typically the marginal process capability will narrow. That gap between the requisite and marginal process capability will narrow for the same reason, because the team no longer can just work a little bit harder to increase output. They no longer have a capability to link that performance to the new environmental conditions. So now on the right hand side, if we have an increase in variability or an increase in the demand, process compliance can address it more because the existing processes, procedures, and social technical system is designed to exploit that type of environmental command. So if you increase process compliance capability, then you can provide an increase in process capability. Basically, the team gets better at what it does. And when it becomes better at what it does, it becomes more experienced, and it's more able to apply process compliance to address future differences in environmental variability. And these bottom circles basically shows how the interactions between the social system and the technical system create that process capability. When the environment changes, the technical and social system no longer addresses that demand. That process capability is in relation to the environmental demand. When the environmental demand changes, the existing process capability will decrease because, once again, that social technical system is no longer designed for what the environment requires. Whereas if we have an increase in process compliance and an increase in the capability of the social technical system in relation to a environmental demand that has not changed in the type of demand that it requires, then you can have a larger process capability because it's able to absorb more of the environmental demand as long as it is the exact type as before. So, recommendations for team resilience. I recommend that teams should have both process and compliance and process resilience, but for two different reasons. Process compliance allows a team to absorb variability and to absorb changes in demand. So that's very important for like the end of the month when you have to create more product. Now, process resilience is also required, but that's required when the complexity of the environment has changed. And this is very important, as this allows a team to identify that the environmental complexity has changed. The team then begins to go into this continual improvement model where it begins to take in feedback to understand what is required to change, creates the changes, pulls in resources, and then realigns things to address this new environmental demand. Now, it must be very important to understand that these teams must have the ability to pull in resources as required. In many cases, organizations will actually stunt process resilience because process resilience in some cases can be costly. It can be seen as a waste of resources. So in some cases, process compliance can actually impede process resilience. So you have to find a good balance between the two. So teams operating in increasing environmental demand conditions should focus more on process compliance. This is because the demand is increasing, but the complexity is not changed. For instance, if you have a legacy product and you're basically just trying to sell this legacy product until something better comes along, then you may want to use process compliance. But if you have a product that's in an increasingly complex environment where the demands that the environment places on the product changes frequently, you may want to focus more on process resilience tools to help your team be able to better evolve and change their outputs to this increasing environmental complexity. And so I just have an example that kind of shows both of these. For COVID-19, you have healthcare systems that were not designed to address pandemics. And in this case, the team should be more focused on process resilience so that they can adapt processes or import processes from other systems that may have better outputs or better outcomes, so that they can better evolve how they perform their work. The work will generally change. The nature of what they do changes. Now, if you have a health organization that has who is designed to address pandemics and suddenly has a huge pandemic comes up, they should focus on using their existing processes, but only improve them so that they can improve the process in the short term to address this pandemic. And they could improve the performance in the long term if required, but for the most part, you focus on improving the existing processes and procedures. Maybe make them so that they're able to output more products, like make more medical supplies available to other systems or whatever they do. So when you have health organizations who are designed to address pandemics, you want to focus mainly on their process compliance. Now, there's a small caveat. When they deal with other systems that have to be resilient, they may have to help the other group become resilient. Once again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here because of time constraints, but feel free to contact me and I'll be more than happy to show how this interaction between different systems can play out and how this can be used to improve process resilience of interdependent systems through the process compliant of another system. So process resilience strategies are still useful in improving best practices by identifying environmental differences not addressed in previous processes and procedures. This is important because as the team begins to absorb environmental differences, what they can do is they can create new process, which in turn will become tomorrow's best practices, which will become part of a process compliance model. So you can move from process resilience to process compliance over time when you feel that the environment has come to a point where you can have faith in the requirement of more long-term processes. So thank you very much for listening to this paper. Please feel free to ask any questions. I believe there will be a question and answering session at the end of this. And if I have a chance, I will try to record this and add this to the YouTube recording at a later date. But feel free to ask questions during that time, or if you have questions and listening to this on YouTube, please feel free to send me an email. I'm not sure, well, either way, feel free to leave a comment on YouTube, and my email address is on the paper. I don't believe I put it on this presentation, but feel free to contact me via YouTube. I'll be more than happy to reach out to you with any answers that you may have for these questions. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your feedback.